Welcome to the channel Mirelle Tales. Before we start, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, let's get into today's story.
It was when I ran toward the operating room, panic-stricken after hearing my husband was in critical condition, that a nurse suddenly grabbed me. "Hide and trust me," she whispered. I obeyed and slipped into an adjacent room. 10 minutes later, the doors opened, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It turns out that night it was raining, as if the sky wanted to pour out all its sorrow. The wall clock in Emily's Chicago apartment had just struck midnight. Emily, dressed in loose sweatpants and an oversized lounge shirt, couldn't sit still. She paced the living room repeatedly, checking the silent cell phone resting on the coffee table. Her husband Jason still hadn't come home. It wasn't the first time. Of course, the massive commercial construction project Jason was managing often required him to work late, but tonight felt different. A strange unease had settled in her chest, cold and piercing, like the biting night air outside. Just that afternoon, they had gotten into a minor argument. It was nothing serious, just a disagreement about finances. Emily had asked Jason to cut back on some of his more lavish expenses, but he had reacted with intense irritation, snapping that she didn't understand the pressure of his job. Usually on a night like this, Jason would have texted, "Still at the site," or "Traffic on the Kennedy is a nightmare. Don't wait up." But tonight her phone remained completely silent. Emily had called him 3 times. The first time it rang, but went unanswered. The second and third times went straight to voicemail. His battery probably died. Emily tried to reassure herself, but the sinking feeling in her gut wouldn't fade. Outside, the rain was pouring down heavily. Its sound was like the incessant beating of a war drum. Emily walked over to the window and pulled back the curtains. The street below was slick, glistening under the streetlights, and completely empty. She hugged herself, suppressing a shiver. She thought about her mother-in-law, who always worried excessively whenever Jason was late. Thankfully, she didn't live with them. Otherwise, the atmosphere in the apartment would have been unbearable. At exactly 1230 a.m., the sharp ring of the landline shattered the silence. In the stillness of midnight, the sound was so loud that Emily physically jumped. Her heart immediately began to pound against her ribs. Their home phone almost never rang. With a trembling hand, she picked up the receiver. "Hello?" Her voice sounded muffled. "Am I speaking with Emily, wife of Jason?" a voice on the other end asked. It was a monotonous, professional, and terrifyingly cold voice. "Yes, that's me." "Has something happened to my husband?" Emily asked, gripping the phone tightly. "Ma'am, please remain calm. Your husband has been in a severe car accident on Interstate 90. An ambulance has just brought him to Chicago General Hospital. His condition is critical. They are taking him into emergency surgery right now." Emily's world seemed to grind to a halt. The phone felt slippery in her sweaty palm. Critical. Surgery. The words slipped from her lips like a ghost of a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. Our chief of surgery, Dr. Robert Evans, will be leading the operation. It would be best if you came to the hospital immediately." The voice continued, but Emily barely registered the words. Dr. Robert Evans. Emily knew that name. Dr. Evans was a close associate, and the physician Jason trusted implicitly. Jason respected him enormously. This offered her a microscopic sliver of comfort, but the word critical kept echoing violently in her mind. Yes, I'm on my way right now." Emily hung up without waiting for a reply. For a few seconds she stood frozen. Her legs felt like lead. No, this can't be real. It's a nightmare. Her husband, Jason, the strong, capable man, who always seemed invincible, was now in critical condition. Her brain commanded her body to move, but her muscles refused to cooperate. Then, a sudden surge of adrenaline shocked her system. She grabbed a long trench coat hanging by the front door. She didn't care what she looked like. She didn't even change out of her pajamas. Car keys. Wallet. That was all she could think about. She bolted out of the apartment and took the elevator down, feeling completely hollow inside. The freezing rain slapped her cheeks the moment she stepped out of the building. Emily sprinted toward her SUV in the parking lot. Her hands were shaking so badly she struggled to unlock the door. On the third frantic attempt, she finally got in, started the engine, and slammed on the gas without waiting for it to warm up. The drive to Chicago General Hospital normally took about 30 minutes, but tonight, blinded by the torrential downpour and absolute sheer panic, the journey felt like an eternity. She drove recklessly, tears mixed with the blurry glare of headlights on the windshield. The wipers slashed back and forth frantically, but they weren't fast enough to clear the torrent of rain and her own crying. Her thoughts were a chaotic blur. The image of Jason laughing at dinner last week. The image of Jason furious during their argument this afternoon. Guilt stabbed at her chest. Why did I have to pick a fight over money? What if that was our last conversation? God, please save him. Please save my husband. Emily repeated over and over like a desperate prayer. Her lips trembled. She no longer cared about running red lights or dangerously passing other cars. All she wanted was to get there. To arrive, see Jason, and be told that the word critical had been a massive mistake. Finally, the towering, illuminated structure of Chicago General Hospital loomed ahead. She parked her SUV haphazardly in the emergency drop-off zone, completely ignoring the shouts of a security guard. She sprinted into the ER lobby, breathless, her clothes soaked with rain and her face stained with tears. My husband Jason, he was in a car crash, she screamed at the triage nurse behind the desk. The nurse quickly typed into her computer. Jason. Yes, they've taken him up to the 4th floor, the surgical wing. Take those elevators and take a left. Operating room 3. Thank you, Emily didn't waste a single second. She slammed the elevator button repeatedly. When it didn't open immediately, the wait felt agonizing. She decided to take the emergency stairs. She sprinted up 4 flights without stopping her lungs, burning her heart, threatening to burst out of her chest. She burst onto the 4th floor. The corridor was silent, sterile, and reeked of that sharp, unmistakable hospital bleach smell she had always hated. The hallway was long and somewhat shadowed, lit only by stark white fluorescent lights. Turning left, she saw it at the end of the hall. A set of heavy steel double doors. Above them, a red light glowed ominously, next to the words that froze her blood. Or 3. In. Use. Jason was in there, hovering between life and death. Emily started running again, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She had to go in. She had to see him. She reached out her trembling hand, ready to push open the cold steel door. Her fingertips were mere inches from the metal surface. She could feel the chill of the air conditioning seeping through the cracks. She took a deep breath, preparing to barge in, fully ready to face whatever consequences came, as long as she could be by Jason's side. Just as her skin grazed the door, a firm hand grabbed her arm from the side. Don't do it. Emily let out a muffled shriek and spun around in shock. A young nurse was staring at her, eyes wide with terror. The nurse was dressed in pristine blue surgical scrubs, her mask pulled down around her neck. Her face was deathly pale, but her eyes burned with a terrifying urgency. Her ID badge read Clara RN. You're Jason's wife, Emily, right? The nurse whispered rapidly, her voice low and desperate. Emily nodded, panicked, trying to yank her arm away from the nurse's grip. Yes, my husband is in there. I have to go in. Let me go. No. Nurse Clara gripped her tighter, physically pulling her away from the OR doors. You can't go in. They cannot know you're here. It is a matter of life and death. Emily furrowed her brow. For a split second, utter confusion overpowered her panic. What are you talking about? Who are they? My husband is in critical condition. Listen to me, Emily. Clara's eyes locked onto hers, pleading. I know this is going to sound insane, but this isn't a rescue operation. It's a trap. That word paralyzed Emily. A trap. What does that mean? Dr. Evans is in there. That is exactly the problem, Clara hissed. There's no time to explain. You have to hide right now. Clara tugged on Emily, who was still too stunned to resist. She pointed to a dark wooden door across the hall, slightly obscured behind a vending machine. The door had no sign. It looked like a janitor's closet or a utility room. Get in there. It's a staff locker room that's hardly ever used on the night shift. Lock the door from the inside. No matter what you hear, do not make a sound. Do not come out until I come get you. No matter what happens, do not come out. Emily's mind was spinning out of control. None of this made any sense. A hospital nurse was telling her to hide from her husband's life-saving surgery, calling it a trap, but the sheer, unadulterated terror in Clara's eyes was too real. She wasn't acting. Something was horrifyingly wrong in this hospital, right behind those OR doors. Why should I trust you? Emily whispered, her voice wavering between fear and rising anger. Because I'm the only one who saw your husband's real medical chart before Dr. Evans altered it. Clara fired back rapidly. He is not in critical condition from any accident. Now hurry, they could come out at any second. That last sentence worked. Clara practically shoved Emily across the hallway. With her mind in absolute chaos, Emily stumbled forward. She pushed open the door to the locker room. It was pitch black and smelled faintly of stale coffee and sweat. Clara pushed her fully inside. "Lock it and trust me," she whispered one last time before quietly pulling the door shut from the hallway. Emily heard the soft click of the latch. She was alone in complete darkness. She blindly fumbled for the deadbolt and turned it until it clicked into place. Her heart was hammering so violently against her ribs that it physically hurt. She was hyperventilating. She leaned her back against the door, trying to process what had just happened. Hide. Trap. Fake medical chart. Dr. Evans. Emily slid down the door until she hit the cold linoleum floor. The room was only illuminated by a razor-thin sliver of light bleeding in from under the doorframe. She could barely make out the silhouettes of metal lockers lining the walls around her. She hugged her knees to her chest, desperately trying to suppress the violent shivers racking her body. What the hell was going on? Was this Nurse Clara completely unhinged, or had she just saved her life? Her thoughts immediately returned to Jason. If he wasn't in critical condition, where was he? What were they doing in there, in that operating room? Emily silently crawled toward the door and pressed her ear against the wood. Silence. The corridor outside was dead quiet. She couldn't hear anything over the deafening rush of blood in her own ears. She peeked through the keyhole, but she could only see the blank wall of the opposite hallway. She checked the time on her glowing phone screen. 1:00 a.m. Time seemed to crawl. Every single second felt like an hour. She was trapped in the dark, listening to a terrifying silence, her mind inventing the worst possible scenarios. What if Nurse Clara had just locked her in a closet while Jason actually bled to death on the table? She had nothing to rely on but her gut instinct, and her gut told her that Clara's terrified eyes had been telling the truth. She waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Straining her ears, catching every faint noise. Distant footsteps far down the hall, the low hum of an ice machine, but absolutely nothing from OR3. 5 minutes. She started to feel suffocated. The small room was claustrophobic. She wanted to scream. She wanted to bust out and kick those OR doors wide open. 7 minutes. She prayed silently. Not just for Jason anymore, but for herself. She felt like a rat cornered in a maze. 10 minutes. The longest 10 minutes of her entire life. Suddenly, she heard a distinct mechanical click from the outside. Not at her door, but across the hall. Emily held her breath and pressed her eye to the keyhole again, but the angle was wrong. She shifted, looking for a wider gap near the door hinges. Through the narrow slit between the door and the frame, she saw it. The red light above OR3 had turned off. The surgery was over. Then Emily heard a soft pneumatic hiss. The heavy steel doors of the operating room were opening. In the dead quiet of the sterile hallway, the sound was like a glacier cracking. Emily held her breath, every muscle in her body wound tight as a coiled spring behind the dark locker room door. She kept her eyes glued to the narrow crack, her only window into a world that was about to turn entirely upside down. The first silhouette to emerge was Dr. Evans. He was still wearing his blue scrubs, but he had already pulled his surgical mask down around his neck. He didn't look like a surgeon who had just spent the last hour fighting a desperate battle for a critical patient's life. He didn't look exhausted, stressed, or grim. He looked completely relaxed, his movements methodical and casual. He was peeling off a pair of latex gloves stained with what Emily now realized was fake blood. A wave of profound nausea hit her. Then, a second figure stepped out. Emily fully expected to see a hospital gurney. She expected a helpless, battered body covered by a white sheet. She expected the rhythmic, concerning beep of a heart monitor. What she saw froze the blood in her veins. It was Jason, her husband. Jason wasn't lying down. He wasn't being pushed on a stretcher. Jason was walking. He strolled out of the operating room on his own 2 feet. He, too, was wearing blue surgical scrubs as if he were part of the medical team rather than the patient on the table. He stretched his arms overhead, rolling his neck from side to side as if he had just been sitting in a boring meeting for too long. He was healthy, strong, and completely uninjured. Emily clamped both hands over her mouth. A muffled whimper of absolute despair nearly escaped her throat. This was impossible. It had to be a hallucination. It had to be her brain misfiring from the shock and panic. And then a third person walked out. A woman. She was tall, slender, with long blonde hair, and beneath an open white lab coat she was wearing an elegant designer evening dress. Emily recognized her instantly. Madison, Jason's personal assistant, the woman who always looked at Emily with barely concealed disdain at corporate events. Jason had always dismissed Emily's suspicions, telling her she was being overly jealous and insecure. It turned out Emily hadn't been blind. She had just been incredibly naive. The plan worked perfectly. Jason's voice rang out crisp and clear in the quiet hallway. His tone was deep and relaxed, lacking even a fraction of an ounce of pain. Emily felt like she had just been struck in the stomach with a baseball bat. Dr. Evans chuckled as he tossed the stained gloves into a biohazard bin. Of course it worked. The ER staff on duty tonight are in my pocket. The fake accident report is already logged in the system. The decoy ambulance did its job. Officially, as of this very moment, Jason has suffered severe internal hemorrhaging. I am dying to see Emily's face, Madison said, her voice sounding like the hiss of a venomous snake. She handed Jason a bottle of water. I bet she's on her way right now, crying her eyes out, completely panicking. Poor idiot. Jason laughed. He actually laughed. That warm, familiar laugh that used to make Emily feel safe now sounded like the cackle of a demon. Oh, she'll be an absolute wreck. She's so gullible. Emily bit down hard on the fleshy part of her palm. The physical pain was absolutely nothing compared to the agony tearing her heart to shreds. Not only had she been betrayed, but they were openly mocking her. They had made her the punchline of their sick, macabre joke. The important thing is, when she gets here, Dr. Evans interrupted his tone, shifting back to business. We have to play our parts flawlessly. Jason, you need to get to the recovery room. Hurry up and lie down. We'll hook up the IV lines and the monitors. You have to look weak but stable. Post-op condition. I know, Jason said, rolling his eyes dramatically. I'm weak, but thanks to the brilliant Dr. Evans, I've survived. I will meet Emily in the waiting area, Dr. Evans continued. I'll give her the good news and the bad news. The surgery was a massive success. The bleeding was stopped. But, he paused for dramatic effect. But Madison asked, her eyes gleaming with dark anticipation. But Dr. Evans said, a sinister smirk forming on his lips, I will tell her that during the surgery, we found something else. A highly dangerous blood clot near the liver. I'll tell her I need her signature for a secondary procedure tomorrow morning. An emergency internal cleaning procedure. High risk. Of course, Jason added with a wicked grin. Exactly. Dr. Evans nodded. A procedure with a notoriously high risk of complications with the anesthesia. If something were to happen to her on the operating table, it would be an absolute tragedy. But we would have done everything in our medical power to save her. Emily finally understood. The puzzle pieces violently slammed into place. The target wasn't Jason. The accident wasn't real. The entire thing was a setup. A setup designed specifically for her. Her mind flashed back to 3 weeks ago. Jason had come home with a stack of paperwork for a brand new multi-million-dollar life insurance policy. When Emily asked why they needed another one, he claimed it was to secure their retirement to bulletproof their future. Emily remembered joking, "Why am I the primary insured? It should be you, considering how dangerous your construction sites are." Jason had just laughed it off, kissing her cheek, saying, "It's just part of a comprehensive investment package, honey. Just sign here." And Emily, trusting him as she always did, had signed. She had unknowingly signed her own death warrant. And that argument this afternoon hadn't just been about his lavish spending. Emily had complained that the premium for the new insurance policy was absurdly expensive and had asked him to cancel it. No wonder he had exploded in rage. Emily had, without realizing it, threatened to ruin their meticulous murder plot. And when she doesn't wake up from the operating table, Jason's voice yanked her back from her horrific realization. The insurance payout is millions of dollars. We can finally leave this country, clear the debts, and start a new life in Switzerland. Madison laughed and wrapped her arms around Jason's neck. I've already booked the first-class tickets to Zurich, the 3 of them. Her husband, his mistress, and their trusted family doctor. The 3 of them had plotted her murder down to the finest detail, executing it in the one place that was supposed to be the safest sanctuary in the world, a hospital. Emily's blood was no longer running cold. It began to boil. The paralyzing fear that had gripped her was rapidly calcifying into something else entirely. Something cold, hard, and razor-sharp. Pure, unadulterated fury. She watched the 3 of them casually stroll down the hallway, walking away from the operating room. They turned the corner, likely heading for the elevators toward the recovery wing. The sound of their footsteps faded into nothingness. The corridor was dead silent once more. Emily leaned back against the door, her entire body shaking violently, but it was no longer from fear. She was trembling with pure rage. She was trapped alone in a dark, suffocating closet, while her would-be murderers were on the exact same floor waiting for her to walk right into their slaughterhouse. She had to get out of there. But how? Suddenly, she heard a noise at her door. Not out in the hallway, a soft metallic scrape. Someone was sliding a key into the lock from the outside. Emily froze. Her heart stopped beating. Did they know I'm in here? Did Madison, Jason, or Dr. Evans realize someone was listening? Have they come back to finish me off now? The doorknob turned agonizingly slowly. The door creaked open just a fraction. A beam of harsh hallway light cut through the pitch-black, blinding Emily. A small figure in blue scrubs slipped inside swiftly. "Emily," she whispered. A wave of relief so massive washed over Emily that her knees nearly buckled. It was Nurse Clara. Clara quickly shut the door behind her and threw the deadbolt again. She leaned against the door, panting heavily. In the dim light filtering from underneath her face was as white as a ghost's. "Did you see them?" Clara asked, her voice quivering. Emily couldn't even speak. She just nodded. Tears of profound rage and betrayal finally spilled over her eyelashes. "Did you hear their conversation?" Clara pressed. Emily nodded again. "Everything," she whispered, her voice gravelly and raw. "The insurance policy. The fake surgery. The plan they have for me tomorrow." Clara closed her eyes for a second as if absorbing the weight of the evil herself. "Oh my God." I suspected it, but hearing it confirmed. "It's monstrous." "Why?" Emily asked, staring intently at the young nurse. "Why are you helping me? You're risking everything." Clara slid down to sit on the floor next to Emily and took a deep, shaky breath. "I've suspected Dr. Evans for a long time. Ever since I was a rookie surgical admin nurse." Emily listened, gripping Clara's forearm as if she were the only anchor left in her shattered universe. "He's not a doctor," Clara said, quietly staring blankly at the metal lockers opposite them. "He's a butcher. His specialty is accidents. On the operating table, he scopes out wealthy patients with massive insurance policies or elderly patients with no family to ask questions. He schedules a routine, simple surgery. Then, during the operation, there are sudden complications, a fatal allergic reaction to the anesthesia, an unexpected catastrophic hemorrhage, something that can never be definitively proven as medical malpractice. The patient dies," Clara continued, her voice hardening with disgust. "The insurance payout clears, and somehow, Dr. Evans always receives a very generous anonymous donation to his private research fund a few weeks later. He is a despicable monster." "But how did you know about Jason?" "About my situation tonight," Emily asked. "I was the floor supervisor on duty tonight," Clara explained. "I saw the emergency surgery logged under Jason's name. The code entered was blunt abdominal trauma. But something was totally wrong. There was no supporting intake data from the ER. Usually an ER trauma patient's vitals and scans are automatically ported into the surgical system. His file was completely blank. It was as if this critical patient had magically materialized right outside the OR. A chill ran down Emily's spine. "Out of suspicion," Clara continued, "I used my admin access to dig into the system logs. I saw that Dr. Evans himself had manually bypassed the system and entered the data. That is incredibly unusual for a surgeon of his status. So I did something incredibly reckless. I knew the override passcode to his private office. An hour ago, while he was supposedly scrubbing in for this life-or-death surgery, I sneaked in. I had to know what he was hiding." Clara's eyes burned fiercely. "In a locked desk drawer, I found your husband's real file. It wasn't an ER trauma report. It was the result of a comprehensive full-body physical exam he took 2 days ago. The conclusion: perfect absolute health. Of course he was," Emily thought bitterly. "And in that same drawer." Clara's voice dropped lower. "There was your file, Emily. A copy of the new multi-million-dollar life insurance policy. The payout amount is astronomical, and at the very bottom, listed as the consulting medical examiner, was Dr. Evans's signature." It all made horrifying sense. The fake accident, the fake surgery, and the elaborate setup for a second lethal operation designed solely to murder her for cash. "I knew I didn't have much time," Nurse Clara said. "I knew they were going to call you in. I didn't know the exact details of their plan, but I knew I couldn't let you walk into that waiting room blind. I ran to the hallway hoping to intercept you, and thank God I got to you just in time." Emily squeezed the nurse's hand tightly. You saved my life, Clara. Not yet, Clara said, her expression turning dead serious. We're just getting started. They know you're coming. They are up there waiting for you right now. What do I have to do? Emily asked, feeling the panic threatening to bubble up again. I can't. I can't go up there and act. I can't look Jason in the eye and pretend to be a grieving wife. You have to, Clara said, firmly gripping Emily by the shoulders. You have to play your part just like they are playing theirs. Right now, they will have moved Jason to recovery room 2 at the end of this hall. Doctor, Evans will call your phone any second. You have to pretend to be completely devastated, sad, hysterical, relieved that he survived. Cry, beg. Clara's instructions were rapid-fire and precise. When Dr. Evans hands you the paperwork for your procedure tomorrow, you have to refuse to sign it. If I refuse, they'll know I suspect something. Don't refuse outright. Play the hysterical wife. Say you're in clinical shock. Say you need time to process that you have to call Jason's mother first. Make up any excuse. The only thing that matters is that you do not sign that paper tonight. We need time. Time for what? Emily asked. To gather physical proof, Clara said. We can't just run out the front door. They will hunt you down. And we can't go to the Chicago PD with just a crazy story. Doctor, Evans is a respected pillar of the medical community. Jason is a wealthy developer. They'll paint you as a hysterical sleep-deprived wife having a mental breakdown. We need bulletproof, irrefutable evidence. What evidence? First, Jason's real medical report that I saw in Dr. Evans' office. Second, the fake surgery log from the hospital server. And third, the security camera footage. Emily's eyes went wide. Security cameras. Yes. I am 100% sure Jason did not arrive at this hospital in an ambulance, Clara said. He drove himself here. Most likely, he parked in the underground staff parking garage, which is completely isolated at night. If we can secure the security footage from tonight showing him walking into the hospital totally fine, we destroy his entire accident alibi instantly. Dr. Evans' office is in the basement, Emily said, her brain finally shifting into survival mode. Correct. Right next to the medical records archive and the main security server room, Nurse Clara confirmed. It's his personal lair. Clara pulled a blank white keycard from her scrub pocket. This is a master override keycard. I swiped it from the main security desk earlier. But there is a massive problem. The basement hallway is heavily monitored by cameras and Dr. Evans is paranoid. He often checks the feeds from his phone. Emily stared at the small plastic card in Clara's hand. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I will create a major distraction, Clara said. I'm going to pull the fire alarm on the top floor. That will draw all the security guards and staff away from the basement. Will that give me enough time? Emily asked, her heart racing again. You have to sneak down to the basement, Clara said, locking eyes with Emily. Get into Dr. Evans' office and find Jason's real file. Take photos of it. Then go into the server room. Pull the footage from the last 3 hours. If you have a data cable, you can transfer it to your phone. Emily patted her coat pockets. She had her phone but no cable. Use this, Clara said, unhooking a small silver USB flash drive from her lanyard. Plug it into the server terminal and copy the data. Be fast, Emily. Clara, I don't know how to do this. Can't you do it? Emily pleaded. I can't. You have to. If I'm missing during a fire alarm, they'll know something is wrong. You are our only shot at exposing them. After you get the files, meet me at the basement emergency exit by the loading dock. We walk out of here together. Nurse Clara had just handed her an impossible mission: walk directly into the lion's den, steal the evidence, and outsmart her murderers while they were waiting for her upstairs. Right at that exact second, the cell phone in Emily's hand vibrated aggressively. The name lighting up the screen made her blood run cold, then hot with rage. Dr. Robert Evans. It's starting, Nurse Clara whispered, her eyes wide. Answer it. Play your part. Weak, hysterical, submissive. Emily took a deep, shuddering breath. The stale air of the locker room felt heavy in her lungs. In her hand, the phone vibrated like an angry hornet. This was her stage. It was time to put on the performance of her life. Weak, hysterical, submissive. Emily swiped the green icon and brought the phone to her ear. She summoned all the agonizing pain and betrayal she had just experienced and weaponized it, channeling it into a voice trembling with raw, convincing terror. Yes, Dr. Evans. Emily, thank God. Dr. Evans' voice on the other end was so warm, so deeply affectionate, so full of faux compassion, that it made Emily want to violently throw up. "Where are you? We've been waiting for you. I need to speak with you immediately." I just got here," Emily sobbed, playing her role flawlessly. "Jason, my husband. How is he? Doctor, please tell me he's alive." There was a calculated, dramatic pause on the line. "He is a very strong man, Emily. The operation was extremely difficult. We almost lost him twice. The internal hemorrhaging was catastrophic." Emily closed her eyes, picturing Jason casually stretching his neck outside the OR. "Catastrophic, my ass. But my team and I managed to stop the bleeding. He is still incredibly weak, but he is past the worst of it. He is in recovery room 2, just down the hall from the surgical wing on the 4th floor. Oh, thank God. Thank God," Emily wailed this time, faking absolute tearful relief. "You can see him now. But there is another urgent medical matter we must discuss regarding the next steps." Dr. Evans' tone shifted to grave concern. "Meet me in recovery room 2. "Yes, doctor. Emily hung up. She looked at Nurse Clara, her face now completely hardened into stone. "It's time," Emily said. "Remember," Clara said, grabbing Emily by the shoulders. "He will present you with the paperwork. Do not sign it. Make an excuse. Say you're in shock. Say you have to call family, and then get the hell out of that room. I'll trigger the fire alarm distraction. Take the service elevator at the far end of the hall near the stairwell down to the basement. I'll meet you at the loading dock exit. Bring the evidence." Emily nodded. She quietly unlatched the locker room door. The hallway was still empty. She took one last deep breath and stepped out. She was no longer walking like the terrified, desperate wife. She was walking like a predator hunting its prey, perfectly disguised in the skin of a broken woman. She walked down the hallway with a deliberately unsteady, staggering gait. She spotted the door marked Recovery Room 2. She pushed it open weakly. The room was dim, illuminated primarily by the soft, rhythmic glow of the medical monitors flanking the hospital bed. And there they were. Dr. Evans stood gravely by the bed, holding a clipboard. The snake, Madison, stood in the corner, her face painted with an expression of deep fake sorrow. And in the bed lay Jason. Emily almost let out a bitter laugh. Their production value was impeccable. Jason's face had been powdered to look ashen and pale. An IV line, which Emily was certain was nothing but harmless saline, was taped to the back of his hand. An EKG monitor next to him beeped in a steady, convincing rhythm. Jason's eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths to sell the illusion of near-death weakness. Jason. "Oh, honey." Emily rushed to the side of the bed and burst into hysterical sobs. She grabbed his hand. It was warm, strong, and calloused. It was not the hand of a man who had just brushed past death's door. Emily had to use every ounce of her willpower to resist snapping his fingers backward. "Doctor, he looks so pale," Emily cried, turning to Dr. Evans, her eyes brimming with forced tears. Dr. Evans placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He has lost a tremendous amount of blood, Emily, but he will pull through. As I said, he is strong. Thank God we caught it in time. But, Doctor," Evans deployed the word Emily had been waiting for. "But what? What's wrong, doctor?" Emily looked up, her face a perfect portrait of panic. "While we were operating to repair his internal organs," Dr. Evans explained, with the patronizing patience of someone talking to a toddler, "we found something unexpected. A rather large blood clot near his liver. It is unrelated to the car accident, but it is extremely dangerous. It could rupture at any given moment." Emily stared at him, letting her lower lip tremble. "You mean, we have to remove it immediately," Dr. Evans said firmly. "I have already scheduled a secondary emergency surgery for tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. A thorough internal clearing procedure." In the corner, Madison had to look down at her phone to hide a smirk. "Another operation," Emily whispered in horror. "It is entirely for his safety. However," Dr. Evans flipped a page on his clipboard. "The procedure is highly risky. It is a very delicate area. There is a high risk of lethal complications with the anesthesia and of uncontrollable internal bleeding. I need your consent as his proxy." Dr. Evans held out the clipboard to Emily. Attached to it was a document titled Consent for High-Risk Surgical Procedure. Below the dense medical jargon was a blank line waiting for her signature. The signature for her own death warrant, which they would later alter or use to justify putting her on the table once Jason was supposedly stable. Suddenly, Jason's eyes fluttered open weakly. Like a D-list soap opera actor, he wheezed. "Sign it, honey. I trust Dr. Evans." Madison stepped out of the corner. "Emily, Jason needs this. Please don't hesitate. It's to save his life." The three of them surrounded her. 3 starving wolves circling a lamb. Emily looked at the silver pen. Dr. Evans was holding out to her. She looked at Jason's ridiculously powdered, fake-sick face. She looked at Madison's cynical, barely hidden smile. Emily started to shake violently this time, half real, half acted. "Emily, time is of the essence." Dr. Evans pressed the warm bedside manner, slipping just a fraction. "I can't," Emily shrieked violently, pushing the clipboard away. "I feel dizzy. I'm going to be sick." "Another high-risk surgery. I can't make this decision alone. I have to call his mother. I have to call Jason's mom." She faked a massive choking sob. "I need air. I'm going to throw up. I need the restroom." Before Dr. Evans or Madison could react to her outburst, Emily bolted out of the room. She heard Dr. Evans shout her name. Emily wait, but she didn't stop. She sprinted down the hallway, rounded a corner, and blew past the main nursing station. She didn't go to the nearest restroom. She ran straight toward the far end of the wing, exactly where Nurse Clara had told her to go. Just as she reached the final corner, an absolutely deafening fire alarm erupted throughout the entire building. The piercing sirens blared from the floors above. Strobe lights flashed violently on the walls. Nurses and orderlies began rushing out of rooms in confusion. A security guard sprinted past Emily toward the main elevators, shouting into his radio. It was Clara's distraction. It was working flawlessly. In the midst of the chaotic evacuation protocols, no one paid any attention to Emily. She spotted a heavy metal door marked Service Elevator, Staff Only. She swiped the white keycard Clara had given her. The scanner beeped green, and the heavy doors slid open. Emily stepped into the cramped metal box that smelled faintly of machine oil and bleach. She smashed the B button for the basement. The doors closed instantly, muffling the chaotic blare of the fire alarms. Standing alone in the descending elevator, Emily leaned against the back wall, her heart hammering at 1,000 beats per minute. She had won the first round, but now she was willingly descending straight into the beast's lair. The service elevator lurched to a halt with a soft ding. The doors slid open. The view before her was a stark contrast to the bright, sterile surgical floors above. The hospital basement was incredibly dim, freezing cold, and smelled heavily of damp concrete and ozone. Massive exposed pipes ran along the low ceiling, some dripping condensation onto the cracked floor. The deafening fire alarms from the upper floors were nothing but a distant, muffled hum down here. Emily stepped out, her hand gripping Clara's keycard so tightly her knuckles were white. The silence was eerie. She followed the faded directional signs painted on the cinder block walls. Archives, maintenance, server room. At the very end of the long corridor, under a flickering fluorescent tube, she saw them. 2 doors, side by side. One had a frosted glass pane that read, "Dr. Robert Evans, Chief of Surgery." The other was a heavy reinforced steel door marked Main Server Room, Restricted Access. This was the lair. Emily decided to hit Dr. Evans' office first, to secure Jason's real medical file. She swiped the keycard. The heavy wooden door clicked open silently. She slipped inside. The office was shockingly luxurious for a hospital basement. Thick Persian rugs, a massive mahogany desk, and towering bookshelves. It smelled of expensive espresso and rich leather. The blood money from medical murder clearly paid well. Emily darted to the desk. She tugged at the drawers. Locked. She didn't have time to pry them open. Her eyes desperately scanned the bookshelves. Between thick medical journals were rows of binders. She read the labels, research agendas. Patients. She pulled the patient's binder. Empty. She pulled another marked Special Projects, and inside she found it. A thin, unmarked manila folder. She ripped it open. Her heart leapt into her throat. There it was. The results of Jason's comprehensive physical exam dated just 2 days ago. At the very bottom, a large red stamp proudly declared optimal physical condition. Right behind it was a thicker folder. Emily opened it. It was a mountain of financial documents. Final notices from offshore banks, a pending bankruptcy filing for a multi-million-dollar debt under Jason's shell corporation. Here it was. The physical proof and the exact motive. Emily whipped out her phone. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely unlock her camera app. She quickly snapped crystal-clear photos of every single page. The physical exam, the optimal stamp, the bankruptcy filings, the massive debt notices. Done. She shoved the files back into the binder and placed it exactly where she found it. Now for the security cameras. She slipped out of the office, pulling the door shut silently, and stepped over to the heavy steel door of the server room. She swiped the card. A heavy mechanical thud echoed, and she pulled the door open. A blast of freezing, hyper-conditioned air and the deafening roar of cooling fans hit her face. The room was a maze of towering black server racks blinking with thousands of green and yellow lights. She quickly located a standalone console terminal with a stack of monitors in the far corner. She read the digital labels on the feeds. Lobby, Hallway 4 OR, ER, Triage, and finally, Underground Staff Garage. Bingo. She pulled out the silver USB drive Clara had given her and jammed it into the terminal's port. She clicked the mouse, dragged the video files from the last 3 hours onto the drive icon. A progress bar popped up on the screen. Copying. Emily's heart pounded in rhythm with the slowly climbing percentage. 10%. 20%. She glanced at the live feed of the parking garage on the monitor. It was totally deserted. 30%. 40%. Come on, please hurry, she muttered to the machine. 50%. 60%. Suddenly, she heard a noise. Not inside the server room, but outside, echoing down the concrete basement hallway. Footsteps. 2 pairs of hard-soled shoes walking very fast. Emily's heart stopped dead. The fire alarm must have been cleared. They were hunting her. 500 Tischer. 500 Boscher. The footsteps grew louder, closer. They stopped right outside the server room door. She couldn't have gone far. She heard Dr. Evans' crisp, furious voice through the heavy door. You check my office. I'll check the server room. Panic seized Emily's throat in a vice grip. She stared desperately at the screen. 95%. 98%. The heavy door handle of the server room began to turn. 99%. Copy complete. Emily yanked the USB drive out of the port. Just as the heavy steel door swung open, she spun around her back, slamming against the server rack behind her. Standing in the doorway was Dr. Evans, his eyes burning with lethal rage. Right behind him, Madison stepped into view, a triumphant, wicked smile plastered across her face. Were you looking for me, Emily? Madison mocked, her voice, sickeningly sweet but dripping with deadly intent. That was a very cute little stunt, Emily, Dr. Evans said, stepping fully into the freezing room. He glanced at the video terminal, then down at the USB drive clutched tightly in Emily's fist. Hiding in the locker room, faking a hysterical breakdown, sneaking down to the basement. Did you really think we were that incredibly stupid? And Nurse Clara Emily whispered, her voice trembling. That nosy little bitch, Dr. Evans laughed darkly. We already took care of her. She won't be bothering anyone ever again. Emily's stomach twisted into a knot of pure terror. What had they done to Clara? Well, you really thought you were so clever, didn't you? Madison sneered, stepping forward and violently snatching Emily's cell phone right out of her hand. She swiped the screen open and looked at the photo gallery. Ah, our evidence. How adorable. She methodically deleted the photos one by one right in front of Emily's face. Jason's medical report, the bankruptcy papers deleted. Even from the recently deleted folder. Gone. I still have this, Emily yelled, holding up the USB drive like a shield. The footage of Jason walking into this hospital. You can't delete this. Dr. Evans smiled. It was the coldest, most soulless smile Emily had ever seen. Really? Why don't you take a closer look at what you just copied? Emily stared at him, confused. That footage you just risked your life to download, Dr. Evans explained with the smug arrogance of a professor lecturing a failing student, is a pre-rendered loop of last night's empty garage. I programmed it specifically for anyone who came down here snooping. Emily looked down at the silver flash drive in her hand. It suddenly felt entirely worthless. And the files in my office, Dr. Evans continued, taking a step closer. That medical report was a fake copy we planted there on purpose. As bait. The originals were shredded and incinerated hours ago. It was a trap. Her entire daring escape to the basement had been an orchestrated trap. They had let her run out of the recovery room on purpose. They had actively herded her down here into a dead end, "Welcome to the trap, Emily," Dr. Evans said softly. "Now you have two choices. Either you sign the surgical consent form the easy way." Madison reached behind her back and pulled out a massive, terrifying medical syringe filled with a completely clear liquid. "Or we make you sign it," Madison sneered. "And after that we can just proceed with your emergency procedure right here, right now." The freezing server room suddenly felt suffocatingly hot. The walls of humming black machinery seemed to close in on her, trapping her with two apex predators. Dr. Evans' words had hit her like a sledgehammer. The USB drive was useless. The photos were gone. Nurse Clara had been eliminated. She was completely alone. Every single move she thought was her own clever strategy had actually been a breadcrumb trail they had laid out for her. She had danced perfectly to their tune, and the song had ended right in the jaws of the wolf. Madison smiled a smile of pure sadistic satisfaction. She twirled the large syringe in her hand, the clear liquid catching the harsh fluorescent light. "Come on, Emily," Madison hissed. "Pick your poison. Sign it nicely, or we put you down for a little nap first." Dr. Evans produced the clipboard from his coat and held it out. The blank line for the signature seemed to mock her. "Playtime is over, Emily. We have a very tight schedule to keep." Emily's mind raced at light speed. The fear was absolutely there, a cold, paralyzing terror. But right beneath it, the raging inferno of fury she had felt in the locker room flared up again. It consumed the fear. They thought they had won. They thought she was just the stupid, submissive trophy wife. They were dead wrong. "If the new evidence is fake, I'll just have to use the old evidence." Emily raised her hands, deliberately shaking them to fake a total psychological collapse. She looked up at Dr. Evans with wide, pleading eyes. Okay. I lose. You win." Dr. Evans smirked slightly. "A very wise choice." "I'll sign it," Emily croaked, her voice raw. "But, please, just let me make one quick phone call to my mom. I just want to hear her voice one last time before." Madison scoffed loudly. "Oh my God, so dramatic." Dr. Evans seemed to consider it for a fleeting second. "No calls. Sign the paper now." He was losing his patience. "At least give me my phone back then," Emily begged, pointing to her device in Madison's hand. "All my family photos are on there. I just want to look at a picture of my mother." Madison rolled her eyes dramatically but glanced at Dr. Evans, who gave a tiny, dismissive nod. "Give it to her. She can't call anyone from down here anyway. We jammed the cell signals in the basement." Of course they had. They had thought of absolutely everything. Madison tossed the phone onto the concrete floor at Emily's feet. "Here. Look at your mommy." Emily crouched down slowly, calculating every single micro-movement to appear utterly defeated and broken. She picked up the phone. Her hands were still trembling, but this time she was in complete control of them. Her heart was pounding not from fear but from a massive surge of pure adrenaline. She held the phone, staring at the cracked screen. "Thank you," she whispered. She stood up slowly, and in an instant, her entire demeanor shifted. Her previously slouched shoulders snapped back. Her spine straightened. The wide, pleading terror in her eyes vanished, replaced by a gaze so hard and icy it could cut glass. The muscles in her jaw locked. Dr. Evans and Madison instantly felt the atmospheric shift. Their smug smiles faltered. "You're right," Emily said, her voice completely flat and devoid of any emotion. "It was a good game. It was a great bait. But you made one massive miscalculation." "And what the hell is that?" Madison sneered, though her grip tightened on the syringe. "You thought I only discovered my husband's rot tonight," Emily said. "But I've smelled his garbage for months." She quickly unlocked her phone. Madison had deleted the photos from the gallery app, but Madison didn't know how to navigate to the hidden, encrypted audio folder buried in Emily's file manager. "Before I sign anything," Emily said, her thumb hovering over the screen, "I'd like you to listen to this. Consider it a lullaby." She pressed play. For a second, nothing happened. Then a voice boomed out of the phone's speakers, echoing loudly in the server room. Jason's voice. Crisp, arrogant, and clear. "No, I don't give a damn about your gratitude. Just make sure the consulting fees are wired to the Zurich account by the end of the month. $2 million. Wash it clean. I don't care how you do it, just make sure the feds don't see a single cent of it." The recording was from 3 months ago. A late-night phone call between Jason and a shady contractor. Jason had been orchestrating massive kickbacks and money laundering for his latest commercial build. Emily had secretly recorded him through the crack of his home office door, thinking she could use it as leverage in a future divorce settlement. She never in a million years imagined she would be using it to save her own life. Dr. Evans and Madison froze entirely. The blood drained from their faces, leaving them chalk white. "That," Dr. Evans stammered, his calm facade shattering. "That has absolutely nothing to do with this." "Oh, it has everything to do with this," Dr. Emily said, taking a bold step forward. "This proves exactly who my husband is. It proves he's a federal criminal, and this recording, combined with my sworn testimony, will trigger an immediate FBI investigation into every single one of his finances, including his highly suspicious multi-million-dollar life insurance transactions with you. You are never walking out of this room alive," Madison shrieked, raising the syringe like a dagger. "Probably not," Emily said, staring Madison down without blinking. "But this phone," she held the device high in the air, "is recording every single word spoken in this room from the moment you two walked in. It was a total bluff. The signal down here really was dead. It couldn't be transmitting anything. But they didn't know that for sure. And this live recording," Emily continued, projecting her voice powerfully over the hum of the servers, "is hard linked to a dead man's switch on my cloud server. If my heart rate monitor drops, or if I don't input a specific bypass password, in the next 5 minutes, this audio, your full confession, Madison's threat to drug me, and Jason's money laundering will be automatically emailed to my divorce attorney, the Chicago Tribune, and the FBI field office." Dr. Evans' eyes blew wide open in sheer panic. The bluff had worked. He bought it entirely. "Stop her," Dr. Evans screamed, his composure completely destroyed. "Madison, stick her right now. Get the phone." Madison snapped out of her shock, let out a feral screech, and lunged at Emily, the needle pointed straight at Emily's chest. Emily scrambled backward, her shoulders slamming hard into the cold metal of the server racks. There was nowhere left to run. She threw her arms up to protect her face, bracing for the piercing sting of the needle. "Stop." A new voice exploded into the underground room. A voice dripping with absolute rage and unquestionable authority. The heavy steel door of the server room, which Dr. Evans had closed behind him, was kicked violently open. Standing in the doorway was Jason. He was still wearing his fake blue scrubs. His face was flushed crimson with uncontrollable anger. His eyes burned with a maniacal fire. He didn't look like a weak, recovering patient. He looked like a furious king who had just realized his most trusted advisors had completely botched the assassination. "What the hell are you idiots doing down here?" Jason roared, his voice bouncing off the concrete walls. The plan was Recovery Room 2, not the damn basement. He stopped dead in his tracks, taking in the bizarre tableau before him. A hyperventilating, terrified Dr. Evans. Madison frozen mid-lunge with a lethal syringe. And Emily standing tall against the servers, wielding her cracked cell phone like a loaded gun. Jason's eyes locked onto Emily, and the raw fury on his face slowly morphed into stunned realization, and then into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He finally understood. His wife knew. She knew absolutely everything. It was a total Mexican standoff. 4 people locked in a freezing, humming server room. The 3 predators were now glaring at each other with intense distrust, while their prey stood in the center holding the ultimate trump card. Jason stepped fully into the room. His eyes never left Emily. So he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal whisper. "You knew." "I knew everything," Jason, Emily fired back, her voice equally venomous. "The fake accident. The insurance fraud. Your pathetic plan to murder me tomorrow morning." Jason whipped his head toward Dr. Evans. "You explicitly told me she didn't know. You said you took care of that bitch, Nurse Clara. She set us up," Dr. Evans stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Emily. "She faked the panic attack, and she has a recording. An old wiretap of your offshore business deals." Jason's jaw clenched so hard Emily thought his teeth would shatter. "What recording?" "Play it again," Emily told herself. "I have to keep turning them against each other." Emily hit the play button again. Jason's voice barking orders to launder $2 million to Zurich filled the room once more. Jason closed his eyes. He recognized that phone call. He knew exactly what day it happened, but he had zero idea Emily had been eavesdropping. "You," Jason hissed, turning his venomous glare back to Emily. "So this was your big master plan. Trap me with a wiretap to take half my money in a divorce." "That was just the appetizer," Emily said, pushing her advantage. That just proves you're a white-collar criminal. But this," she raised the phone higher, "is the proof of your attempted murder tonight." "What are you talking about?" Jason demanded. "This phone," Emily repeated her massive bluff, "has recorded every single second in this room. Dr. Evans, confessing to taking care of Nurse Clara. Madison, threatening to inject me with a lethal dose. And now you standing right here confirming the entire assassination plot." Madison and Dr. Evans instinctively took a step back, but Jason just laughed. A dry, hollow, terrifying laugh. "Do you really think I'm a complete idiot, Emily? We are in a reinforced concrete basement. There is zero cell signal down here. No cloud, no lawyers, no dead man's switch. Nothing has been sent anywhere." Jason took a slow, menacing step toward her. "Whatever is on that phone dies in this room. And so do you." Emily's stomach plummeted into an icy abyss. Her bluff had failed. Jason knew her too well. He called it instantly. "Don't give me the damn phone," Jason ordered, holding out his hand. "No," Emily whispered. "Give it to me," Jason lunged. He was incredibly fast, much faster than Emily anticipated. His large hand clamped down brutally around her wrist, twisting it with bone-snapping force. Emily screamed in agony. The phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the hard concrete floor. The screen shattered entirely. Jason smirked, raising the heel of his heavy boot to crush the device into dust. "Game over, sweetheart. Too late." A new, booming, confident voice echoed from the doorway. Everyone whipped around. Standing perfectly framed in the doorway was Nurse Clara. She was completely unharmed. She had not been taken care of. She stood tall, her face a mask of righteous fury, and she wasn't alone. Flanking her were two massive, heavily armed hospital security guards, their hands resting cautiously near their utility belts. Jason's eyes bulged out of his skull. Dr. Evans stumbled backward, his legs giving out slightly. "No. That's impossible. Did you honestly think I was that stupid?" Dr. Clara said, stepping into the room. "Did you think I would send Emily down into your slaughterhouse completely alone? What are you talking about?" Dr. Evans stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. "The fire alarm earlier," Clara explained, a fierce smile touching her lips. "That wasn't a distraction to get the guards away from the basement. It was a distraction to keep you busy, while you three were occupied chasing Emily down here. These gentlemen and I," she gestured to the guards, "went straight to the central security control room." Clara pointed a finger straight up at the ceiling in the far corner of the server room. Mounted high on the concrete wall was a small dome security camera. Its tiny red LED light was blinking steadily. "We bypassed the fake loop on your terminal," Clara said. "We took manual control of the mainframe. That camera has been recording every single word, every threat, and every confession you've made in this room, broadcasting in real time straight to the chief of security upstairs." Jason, Dr. Evans, and Madison stared in absolute horror at the blinking red light. They were trapped. "Checkmate." "And that flash drive," Emily added, pointing to the silver USB still resting on the terminal desk. "That was the real bait. A prop to keep you gloating and distracted." Emily looked dead into Jason's eyes. "While you were down here threatening to murder me, Clara backed up the actual footage of your arrival. You strolling through the staff entrance, laughing with Madison. We have it all secured on an off-site server." Dead silence. The hum of the cooling fans was the only sound left in the room. Jason's face was ashen. His meticulously crafted foolproof plan had violently imploded in a matter of minutes. Dr. Evans was the first to completely break. He knew his prestigious career, his freedom, his entire life was instantly over. His eyes darted frantically around the room like a trapped rat. He saw the massive syringe that Madison had dropped on the floor when Jason burst in. With a desperate animalistic roar, Dr. Evans dove for it. "You're not taking me alive!" he screamed. He didn't attack Emily. He attacked the only person holding the technical evidence, Nurse Clara. "Clara, look out!" Emily screamed, but Clara didn't even flinch. She had anticipated this. As Dr. Evans lunged at her like a rabid dog, Clara stood her ground. She smoothly reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out her own syringe, much smaller, but infinitely more effective. "This," Clara said calmly, stepping directly into Dr. Evans' path as he swung at her, driving her needle straight through his scrubs and deep into his thick thigh muscle, "is a maximum-dose, rapid-onset surgical sedative. You know exactly what it does, don't you, Doctor?" Dr. Evans stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes blew wide open in sheer shock. He looked down at the empty syringe sticking out of his leg. He tried to reach down and pull it out, but his hands were already violently shaking. His knees buckled instantly. "You," he slurred before collapsing onto the hard concrete floor like a sack of dead weight. His eyes rolled to the back of his head, out cold. Seeing her co-conspirator drop, Madison completely lost her mind. She shrieked hysterically, abandoning any pretense of a fight. She spun around and tried to shoulder her way past the security guards to run for the stairs. The second guard simply sidestepped, grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back, and slammed her against the wall, slapping heavy steel handcuffs onto her wrists. Only Jason was left. He stood there panting heavily, staring blankly at the unconscious doctor, his sobbing mistress, and finally at his wife, who was staring back at him with absolutely fearless eyes. A blinding, irrational rage seized him. If he was going down, he was going to take Emily with him straight to hell. "This is all your fault," he roared, completely forgetting about the guards, the camera, the police. His vision tunneled until all he could see was Emily. Jason launched himself across the room like a linebacker, his massive hands reaching out to wrap around his wife's throat. The room exploded into chaos. "This is your fault," his scream echoed over the server fans. His eyes were bloodshot pupils dilated with pure adrenaline and psychotic hatred. He lunged forward. The first security guard, who wasn't holding Madison, reacted instantly. "Sir, stand down," he bellowed, stepping directly into Jason's path to intercept him. But Jason, fueled by the desperate, frantic strength of a man who had just lost his entire life, hit the guard like a freight train. He rammed his shoulder into the guard's chest, sending the larger man stumbling backward. The second guard couldn't intervene without letting Madison escape. In a fraction of a second, Jason broke through the defensive line. He reached Emily. He didn't manage to grab her throat. Instead, his large hands clamped down violently on the collar of her trench coat, yanking her forward with brutal force. Emily's head snapped forward, a sharp cry of pain escaping her lips. Jason's other hand clawed at her shoulder, his nails ripping through the fabric of her shirt. "I'm going to kill you," he snarled, his spit hitting her face, his eyes inches from hers. But Emily was no longer the terrified woman from 3 hours ago. The paralyzing fear was permanently gone, replaced entirely by raw, primal survival instinct. When Jason yanked her, she didn't just let herself be dragged. She drove her knee upward with every single ounce of strength she possessed, driving it brutally into Jason's groin and thigh. He grunted in excruciating pain, but his grip didn't loosen. It only enraged him further. He started shaking her violently like a rag doll. "Let her go," Clara screamed, rushing forward to help. At that moment, the first security guard recovered his balance. Seeing Jason actively assaulting Emily, he didn't issue another warning. He charged from behind, wrapping his massive muscular arms around Jason's chest in a crushing bear hug. "You're done, stand down," the guard roared. Jason's feet were literally lifted off the ground, but his iron grip on Emily's clothes held fast. Emily was dragged upward with him, the collar of her coat choking her. Let go of me," Emily screamed frantically, clawing at her own coat, trying to rip herself out of the garment to escape his grip. Jason redirected his psychotic fury toward the guard holding him. He thrashed wildly, throwing vicious elbows backward toward the guard's face, kicking his legs violently. "Get off me, you piece of shit! She's mine!" "Stop resisting," the guard commanded, trying to forcefully sweep Jason's legs and take him to the ground in a controlled takedown. But Jason was entirely out of control. In a desperate, wild, and incredibly reckless move, he threw his entire upper body weight backward, twisting violently to break the guard's hold. The brutal contortion worked. He slipped from the guard's sweaty grip, but the momentum completely destroyed Jason's center of gravity. He stumbled wildly backward, his arms flailing. His left foot caught sharply on the leg of the unconscious Dr. Evans lying on the floor. Emily, Clara, and the two security guards watched the next second unfold in horrifying slow motion. Jason fell backward. He didn't fall onto the flat concrete. He fell directly toward the corner of the main server rack. A solid, unyielding frame of thick black industrial steel housing thousands of pounds of hardware. His upper back hit the rack first, but the violent momentum of his fall was too great. His head snapped backward like a whip. The base of his skull and the back of his neck impacted violently against the sharp, reinforced steel edge of the server frame. The sound wasn't particularly loud. It wasn't a heavy thud. It was a sharp, dry crack. A sickening, horrific crunch, like a thick, dead tree branch snapping under immense pressure. Silence. Every single sound in the room seemed to vanish. Madison stopped screaming. The guards froze in place. The humming of the servers suddenly felt deafeningly loud. Jason didn't slide to the floor. He remained suspended in a grotesque, unnatural seated position. his back propped up against the steel rack. His head slumped heavily to the side at a sickening angle. His eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead, staring directly at Emily. But the look in them had drastically changed. The burning psychotic fury was entirely extinguished. What remained was absolute, unadulterated shock and profound confusion. "Jason," Emily whispered, taking a hesitant step forward. The guard who had tackled him stepped up cautiously. "Sir, hey, we need a medic down here. Code Blue, in the basement server room," he shouted into his radio. Jason slowly opened his mouth. No sound came out, just a shallow, wet wheeze. He tried to lift his right hand. It didn't even twitch. He tried to kick his legs. They remained perfectly motionless. A pure, absolute terror, a completely different kind of terror than his previous rage, flooded into his eyes. He stared at Emily, his lips moving weakly. "I." His voice was a barely audible, gravelly whisper. "I can't move." He swallowed hard, a tear spilling over his eyelash. "My legs. My hands. I can't feel anything." Emily stared down at her husband. The man who had tried to strangle her seconds ago. The man who had meticulously planned to murder her on an operating table for a payout. The man who had spent the entire night faking a critical injury. Now he was genuinely critically injured. "Oh my God," Clara whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. Emily felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just a vast, freezing emptiness. She stared into the eyes of the man, now welling with genuine helpless terror. The irony of the universe was too cruel, too fast, and too perfect. Karma hadn't arrived in a polished courtroom or a prison cell. It had arrived right here in the freezing basement, in the exact center of his own evil plot. Jason was trapped. Truly, permanently trapped. Not behind iron bars, but inside the inescapable prison of his own paralyzed body. "Don't touch him," the security guard yelled, as Emily took a half-step closer. "Do not move his neck. Let the trauma team handle it." Emily stopped. She stood there, looking down at her now utterly defenseless husband. The perfectly healthy man had become a real trauma patient, suffering an injury far more devastating than anything he had pretended to have. The heavy steel doors of the server room burst open again. This time it was the actual chief of hospital security, flanked by two uniformed Chicago police officers he had radioed the second he saw the live feed. They stopped in the doorway, taking in the apocalyptic scene. Madison handcuffed and sobbing uncontrollably against the wall. Dr. Evans unconscious on the concrete. Jason paralyzed and gasping against a server rack. And Emily standing tall in the ruins of her life, her coat torn but her posture unbroken. The game was officially over. Dawn arrived slowly over Chicago. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the massive glass windows of the hospital's main lobby. But the light felt strange and distant to Emily. She was sitting in a quiet staff break room wrapped tightly in a thick, warm hospital blanket. Nurse Clara was sitting right beside her, holding a steaming cup of tea. Another nurse had brought them. Neither of them spoke much. They had already recounted the entire story over and over again to the chief of security, the CPD detectives, and the FBI agents who arrived shortly after. The basement server room had been locked down as an active crime scene. Dr. Evans, the moment he regained consciousness from the sedative, was handcuffed directly to a hospital bed under heavy police guard. Madison had been hauled away in the back of a squad car long before the sun came up, her hysterical wailing echoing across the empty parking garage. And Jason. The trauma team had arrived with extreme caution. They had placed a rigid cervical collar around his neck, carefully transferred him onto a spinal board, and rushed him to the ER, then to an emergency MRI, and finally into the surgical trauma ICU. The official diagnosis came down just as the sun crested the skyline. A catastrophic burst fracture of the C4 vertebra. The spinal cord was completely irreparably severed. He was a C4 quadriplegic, completely paralyzed from the neck down. He could breathe on his own, though, with difficulty. He could blink, move his eyes, and manipulate some facial muscles. But that was it. For the rest of his natural life. The following days were an absolute blur for Emily. She stayed at her parents' house in the suburbs, refusing to speak to the media or anyone else except her high-powered attorney. The news absolutely exploded. The media dubbed it the bloody scalpel scandal. Photos of Dr. Evans, Madison, and Jason were plastered across every major news network and front page in the country. The justice system moved swiftly and ruthlessly. The audio and video recordings from the server room were bulletproof, irrefutable evidence. Dr. Evans faced the heaviest charges: conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated medical malpractice, insurance fraud, and aggravated assault. Clara's sworn testimony blew the lid off a Pandora's box of suspicious surgical deaths spanning a decade. He was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole, stripped of his medical license, and his legacy was utterly destroyed. Madison, as a willing co-conspirator, was also found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Her tearful, beautiful face and practiced sobbing on the witness stand did absolutely nothing to move the stern federal judge. She received a solid 20-year sentence. Clara was hailed locally and nationally as an absolute hero. After the hospital's board of directors was completely purged and restructured, they offered her a newly created, highly prestigious position: Chief Supervisor of Patient Ethics and Surgical Compliance. She accepted immediately, dedicating her life to ensuring no monster like Dr. Evans could ever operate in a hospital again. And Emily Shee filed the divorce papers the exact same day Jason was transferred out of the ICU. She attached the police reports of the attempted murder and the audio recordings of the wire fraud and money laundering. The judge granted the divorce instantaneously in the defendant's absence. All of Jason's remaining assets were frozen by the federal government. The multi-million-dollar life insurance policy was declared permanently null and void. The massive corporate debt Jason had accumulated remained entirely his responsibility, or rather the responsibility of the state-appointed trustee managing his seized, bankrupt estate. Emily walked away completely free. Financially, legally, and emotionally. 1 month later, Emily decided she needed to close this horrific chapter of her life forever. She paid one final visit to Jason. He was no longer in a luxurious private hospital suite. He was in a state-run maximum security long-term care facility designed specifically for federal inmates with severe medical needs. His room was cramped, sterile, and smelled heavily of cheap antiseptic and permanent despair. He lay flat on his back in a specialized mechanical bed, his head completely immobilized by padded braces. Only his eyes could move, staring blankly at the water-stained ceiling tiles. An orderly was just finishing emptying his catheter bag when Emily walked into the room. Jason's eyes darted sharply toward the doorway. He saw her. Emily was wearing a simple, elegant light blue dress. She looked incredibly calm, rested, and radiantly healthy. Jason's eyes narrowed instantly. A pure, impotent, burning hatred flared in his pupils. He tried to speak. A wet, guttural gargling sound scraped out of his throat. He hated her. He blamed her for every single second of his agonizing existence. Emily walked slowly to the side of his bed. She stood there in absolute silence for a long moment, simply looking down at the man she had once loved with all her heart. The man who had betrayed her in the most vile, unimaginable way possible. She didn't feel an ounce of pity. She didn't feel anger. She just felt closure. "I came here to tell you one thing," Emily said, her voice low, steady, and crystal clear in the quiet, depressing room. Jason glared up at her, his eyes bloodshot and watery with rage. "You wanted to put me on an operating table, didn't you, Emily?" Continued, her face a mask of stone. "You wanted me to be completely helpless, relying on machines to keep me breathing just so you could cash a check and start a new life." Jason exhaled forcefully through his nose, his jaw trembling with the effort to scream a word he physically couldn't form. "Well," Emily said, leaning in just a few inches closer so he could clearly see her eyes. "Now you are the one trapped in a bed. You are the one completely helpless, relying on everyone else for absolutely everything. Every meal. Every breath. Every single day. For the rest of your life." She tilted her head slightly. "Isn't it ironic?" Emily straightened her posture, smoothing out the fabric of her dress. "Enjoy the rest of your life, Jason." She turned around and walked out of the room. She walked down the drab gray hallway past the armed guards and pushed open the heavy front doors of the facility. Outside, the morning sun was shining brilliantly. The air was incredibly crisp and clean. Emily took a deep, filling breath, feeling the warm sunlight wash over her face. For the first time in a very long time, she felt completely, truly free. She walked down the concrete